Hello, you're listening to Do Yourself a Favour, the podcast about learning from experience and the things we do to make our lives easier. My name's Tim Sisney from Make Work Work Better, and each episode I'll be talking to my guests about their epiphanies, their inspirations, and the magic of their workflow. And this week I'm joined by Vicki Lovegrove. Hi, Vicki.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you for joining us and Do Yourself a Favour. Would you like to give you a bit of an introduction to yourself to everybody?
Okay, so my name's Vicki Lovegrove and I run a very small graphic design business based in Burton-on-Trent in Staffordshire. I've had my business for 18 years and I've been working within the creative industries for 30 years.
Lovely. And when we first met each other, you were saying there's a kind of coaching angle to what you do as well, which is fascinating.
Yeah, for the last couple of years, I've moved into coaching. So I also coach creatives as well. So that might be people who run their own business or who are creatives within somebody else's business, or they could be freelance creatives or people who just want to know a bit more about using creativity in their business.
Fantastic. So the first question that we come to is, what's something that you wish you'd learnt earlier?
Okay, so I spent a bit of lockdown, like a lot of people, learning something new, but I learned something completely unrelated to what I normally do. I learned a technique called havening, of which I'm still qualifying in, so I can talk to you about it, but I'm not quite qualified yet. It takes a long time.
Sorts of things that I'm not qualified to talk about. I wouldn't worry about that. And very, very few things of the things I talk about I have any authority to speak from whatsoever. So sorry, tell me about havening.
It's a brilliant tool. So havening is a technique which allows somebody to help somebody else, or you can do it yourself, actually. That's what's so great about it. It's a technique which allows you to remove emotional content from a memory. So it's used a lot with people who've experienced trauma and PTSD and things like that. But it can also be used, and this is why I've learned it, within a coaching way to help people overcome things that they've got a bit stuck with. So that's why I've learned it. But it is a really powerful tool. And I wish I'd known it years ago, because if you're somebody, and I'm like this, who can sometimes keep going over and over past events, and sometimes they can stop you moving forward, this can completely change that. It's an amazing tool.
So how do you think it would have helped you knowing this sooner? What kind of impact on you do you think it would have had?
I probably wouldn't have spent 20 years going over and over stuff in my brain, because I had I had parts of my childhood quite difficult to deal with, and it has taken many years of people listening to me. Now, if I'd had havening, I could have dealt with this years ago, but it's fairly new technique, so it might not have been around then. But it is great. It just helps you move forward and helps you recategorize traumatic memories in your brain so that they can just be stored as ordinary memories and they just don't keep popping up and getting in the way of your life. It's really, really clever.
It's remarkable how massively unhelpful our brains can be.
And it's only being unhelpful because it's trying to help you. So when traumatic memories are stored, they're stored so that you can access them again quite quickly should something similar occur. But these memories can just keep popping up at times which are not helpful as well and get in the way, even after you feel that you've dealt with it. So yeah, the brain is helpful. It's really, really trying to help you, but there's so many things it does which we don't need quite so much these days. And that's the thing. It's been a really interesting tool to learn. I won't be using it to half of its capacity in my coaching, but it's great to have met the community of people who work with it on a much deeper level, and I'd be able to refer people to them as well, which is great.
How did you end up getting involved in that and learning about that during lockdown? What was the path that led you there?
Before lockdown, I had some coaching, and my coach uses it as a tool. I couldn't move on in my business, and my niece had died, and it was obviously very upsetting, and I just couldn't, although I'd sort of dealt with that, I couldn't move forward, and I didn't realize it was related. And using the Havening technique, it helped me understand it was related, and how sometimes your memories can get tangled with other memories, which is really unhelpful. But Havening, it was just amazing. A couple of hours and it was all done and dusted, and I was able to move on, which is just incredible, really.
I mean, I've been fortunate in the sense that I don't have a lot of sort of things that I'd call trauma, but I do have, and this is kind of where I can imagine that it would be something that would be incredibly helpful to be able to move on, because I've got just some really embarrassing things, like feelings that occur to me every now and again when I think about, for example, I spent a couple of months in France as part of my degree. I did French at uni and did a couple of months over the summer in France, and I was translating in a little kind of like museum thing so if they had English holidaymakers come in, I would translate. And I realized after 2 weeks being there that there were like 2 or 3 things in that place that I had been translating completely wrongly for weeks. And not just like wrongly in a kind of like, sort of pidgin French kind of, hello kind of fashion, more like I was probably saying something quite inappropriate. And even now, as a 45-year-old man who is never going to see any of those people ever again, it still absolutely makes me cringe when I think about it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? The kind of those sort of like awful feelings. And if that had been something serious that was kind of triggered by whenever I sort of thought about whatever particular subject matter it was I was thinking there. Because I do think about it probably, I would say, once every few months it kind of pops back.
I wonder if it pops up when you're doubting yourself a little bit as well. So you might be doubting yourself about something completely unrelated, and then your brain reminds you, oh, do you remember when you felt this before, when you were saying this stuff that was wrong? And it's that sort of feeling of doubt and possibly a bit of shame, maybe. And it's that strong that your brain just has stored it, thinking, oh, I'll remind you about this every time you feel that.
Yeah, exactly.
You could completely remove that emotion from that memory, and then your brain will go, oh right,
it's really, so I can really imagine how if you've got very, very strong feelings attached to a memory, how that could be completely debilitating, and that could really like stop you moving further than that. I think things like, it's interesting as well because music being like quite so evocative with memory, you could end up with there's certain pieces of music or certain songs that I have struggled to listen to in certain moods because they're so very, very sort of emotionally anchored with certain times in my life or certain people or certain experiences, which is a real shame because some of it's stuff I like. So again, being able to sort of divorce those emotions from that piece of music in some respects might be helpful.
You have to be careful when you use techniques like Havening that you don't remove something that's useful. So you have to really think about, well, do I use this to push myself forward in life? And if you do, perhaps don't touch that. Or if you're going to be giving evidence or anything like that, definitely don't touch it. Sometimes we have things happen and we use them to propel ourselves forward, like, it's like a little bit of fuel, isn't it? And those ones you probably shouldn't touch. But it depends on the person.
Sure. And yeah, I suppose there's a double edge to all emotions. We talk a lot about like stress being a negative thing and something that we need to manage or control, but actually a certain amount of tension, a certain amount of stress is actually, like you say, it's fuel. It provides forward momentum. It gets adrenaline moving in a way that enables us to perform well. And that whole idea of nerves and anxiety and excitement and all of those things being really, really close together, sort of chemically in the body, it's just the way that we choose to acknowledge and act on those. So yeah, there can be useful feelings, or those some things that we perceive as unhelpful, actually, if you can reframe them and if you can think about them in a different way, they can actually be super helpful. to motivate you, push you forward.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, isn't it? Reframing things. Somebody said to me recently, anxiety often isn't anxiety. It could be excitement. And if you thought of it in that way, then you can completely change how you feel about what's happening. So, it depends on the circumstance. But yeah, I think people were too quick to label themselves as anxious when they get that sort of feeling, whereas it actually sometimes could be quite a useful feeling, and you shouldn't, and sometimes you just shouldn't ignore it as well.
I'm just thinking about when I played in bands and so on, I would often get asked, do you get nervous? And it's kind of the same when I'm going to do a workshop or if I'm speaking, some people say, do you get nervous? And generally I get excited. I'm like, I don't get nervous, I get excited. And then, but in reflection, actually, it's pretty much the same feeling. Am I, I get, my heart's racing and I'm kind of a little bit twitchy and a little bit, but because I'm generally heading into something that I know I enjoy and I'm focusing on the positive aspects of doing it, and it's something that that I feel like I'm good at and I know that I'm going to contribute, then it's a completely different feeling to how if I'm about to go in and do an exam or something.
Yeah.
So the second question that I asked you to think about was a book or a concept that change the way you think about things, that maybe alter the direction of your life or change the way that you approach things?
This is so hard because I've got so many books and I love books so much and I reread them over and over and over. But what popped into my head was a book that I got when I was in sixth form at school. And it was the Beatles illustrated lyrics.
Wow, okay. That's a fantastic book as well.
Yeah, it was a reprint in 1990. I checked the date. And then it originally came out in, when was it? 1969. So it was in two editions, 1969, 1970. And it's Beatles fan art. And it's been it's been edited by Alan Aldridge, who did a lot of artwork for the Beatles. And it's all different lyrics which have been illustrated by Beatles fans, and some of it's awful. It's really interesting. There's a lot of photography. It's quite racy in places, but it's just really fascinating to see how people have listened to the lyrics and then they've created these really weird pieces of art around them. Yeah, and so I bought that, and it inspired me when I was at school to create a big music mural in the sixth form common room. So that had the Beatles in it and Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, David Bowie, and it went round the wall. It was massive. I had to pay for all the materials myself, but school let me do it. And I think it was there for about a decade after I left. It's not there now, I've been told. But it was at the time where I was just sort of exploring what graphic design was for me, and thinking of going to college to do graphic design. And there was a film, I don't know if you remember the Olivia Newton-John film, Xanadu.
I'm aware of it, yeah.
Terrible film. It's a film of two halves. One half is okay, the other one is dreadful. But in it, the main character, he's a graphic designer, and what he does is he recreates album artwork onto walls, onto big pieces of board, and they're placed as billboards almost. And I must have seen that around about that time. And it just, the book, thinking of becoming a graphic designer and, quite excited about that part of my life starting. This book is, it's really important. I've really looked after it. Nobody's allowed to touch it. But it's just the strangest book. I'd urge anybody to look at it and you think, what? I mean, there's clearly a lot of drugs taken, people. But yeah, it's really fascinating. And it turned out my art teacher at the time, when I showed it to him, he got him all excited because he'd actually gone to college with John Lennon. So he was able to chat about that. I didn't know him, but they were in the same year. And that was quite interesting, yeah.
So what what was it that drew you to a book of illustrated Beatles lyrics in the 1990s?
Well,
How did that happen?
I don't know if you went into sixth form, but it appears when you go into the sixth form, all anybody wants to do is listen to the Beatles. Of course, yes. And so you go in the common room and it's just Beatles playing all the time, and you like go to art, do a bit of extra art, and there was one person in particular who constantly played the Doors, which I can't bear. But yeah, it felt really current, even though it's not. It's quite strange that at that age everybody seeks out 60s music, but I don't know if they still do. Probably not. They're probably seeking out 80s music or something now. But it felt really current, and I had friends which were really into the Beatles, and this book had been released. I'd seen it in the bookshop, and spent all my money on it.
Interesting. So, I mean, I guess for the listeners, you and I met almost entirely through the fact that we have vinyl collections that we have ended up using in like business branding. Like literally, I think I saw you posted some stuff about your new branding photos that you're using for your business on LinkedIn, and a mutual contact was kind of like tagged me into it going, is Vicki in your house? Like, is that your background? You're doing all right. So this is kind of how we've ended up being in touch. And I'm just kind of interested, how does that, the Beatles and Xanadu connection with you getting into graphic design, I mean, how does vinyl play into that from your point of view? Like, it's aesthetics and music and artwork and those things all playing together.
I think it's so important, isn't it? I remember being at school and we were learning how to use an airbrush, and I'd seen this album cover, and if I thought about it, I would try and dig it out. I think I've still got it. My uncle had got these albums by a band called Asia, and they're all fantasy drawings of dragons coming out of the sea, and I tried to recreate all of that sort of stuff when I was about 16. Obsessed with records all my life, I have been. My dad was very proud of his records. Most of his records didn't have sleeves, and they were just old jukebox records in a box, and they're all getting scratched. And I remember I spent about a year making sleeves for his records and cataloguing them. As soon as I could, I bought myself a record player and I started buying records for myself. And they've all, I'm such a nerd. Most of my records back then, I've only ever played them once, and that was to tape them. So I'd buy them, tape them, listen to them one time. And it's only in recent years where we've got like a setup now in our dining room that I've got them out and I've played them all properly, how they should be played. But I just wanted to keep everything mint, because my dad's, a lot of his records were scratched in that box and they sounded really sort of crackled. So I just didn't want that to happen to my records. Although his were like 50s, 60s records, and they're much more stiffer, aren't they? And
more brittle, yeah.
They're much more brittle, and they're rougher. You can see the grooves a bit more. Yeah, so they're just so nice, aren't they? And it's about having them, smelling them. I do sniff vinyl. It's really quite bad, but I just love it. And I still buy vinyl now. I mean, I had a couple turn up last week, and I've just seen a dispatch notice on another one that's on its way. And fortunately, they're too expensive now, so that keeps a lid on it. But yeah, we like to go to car boots and have a rummage, and if we're on holiday, the kids are like, oh no, because we'll nip in a few charity shops, and if we've got a bit of time, we might seek out a record shop and drive there for the day. But they're just such lovely things, and I know lots of people don't understand it, but it's the collection, isn't it?
Record fairs, secondhand bookshops, yeah, absolutely my kryptonite when I'm on holiday. Yeah. I'm not so bad as my husband. Yeah. I was at some kind of trade show or like exhibition or something like many years ago, and there was a company who was selling, and I've still got a set of them going up our stairs, which are like these they're picture frames designed for vinyl, and they've got like a little button on the top that pops them open, so you can switch around what you have in. And I really enjoy them as a way of kind of reminding myself about sleeve art of records that I like, because if they just sit spine on, then you can't really enjoy them quite as much. And obviously, streaming and digital music has kind of relegated the artwork aspect of records to something quite peripheral. And I just remember as a kid when there wasn't an internet to find out everything you ever needed to know about everything, just searching through the sleeve notes and the liner notes and the covers for any kind of information or inkling about, like, what does this band look like? How many of them are there? What do they do? Where's this come from? And especially like some of the indie stuff that was particularly obtuse in its design, either by design or by necessity. You just kind of ended up with this whole enigma around the people who you listen to, that kind of that now I think is very, very difficult for artists to achieve, just because the amount of coverage that they can get, and the way that they, there's a Wikipedia page about them, you can find out where they were born, you can find out what they had for breakfast, and just any kind of mystery or enigma around music, I think is very, very difficult for bands to maintain if that's what they want to do.
I mean, record sleeves, they're almost mystical, aren't they? They're so lovely. And one band I really liked was Boston, the band from the 70s, More Than a Feeling. That song, and their record cover, very like the Asia ones, sort of fantasy ones, but they were always like these spaceships. They obviously wanted to have this sort of ELO type feel to their covers. And I've got a couple, and on the back is like the picture of the band and everything. And it was only in the last sort of decade I found out that it wasn't even a band. It was just one guy who created everything. So they were lying to you as well. It's the only way you could find out about the band was on the record.
Yeah.
Like you say, there wasn't an internet, so everybody thought it was a band. Yeah, bizarre. But yeah, they're lovely. And I love the way that some of the design for record covers is a bit iconic as well. It's definitely record covers. It's record covers and magazines that got me into graphic design, particularly adverts in magazines. But I mean, the Def Leppard Hysteria album, when you started buying all the singles and you realised each single cover was a bit of the album cover chopped up, and if you collected all the singles, you had the album cover. I mean, that's just quite cool, isn't it?
Well, with the exception of the Big by Def Leppard, yes, it is. Yeah, I've got downstairs a book of comic covers. A big book of comic covers that are all inspired by hip hop albums. So there's 2 volumes of Marvel covers that are all inspired by hip hop albums. And it just shows the extent to which kind of music and other, music informs other artwork, other art forms in so many different ways. And the whole, record sleeve, the classic record sleeve homage type is almost a genre in and of itself now, isn't it? And I also really enjoyed that brief period from kind of like the early 2000s that was kind of people working record sleeves into photos of themselves. So kind of like there'd be like half of their face, or like, Janet Jackson's head and body, and then their legs or whatever it was, who, holding up the record sleeve.
Yeah, my husband.
So I think I just think there's something about the way that those pieces of art, they go into the cultural consciousness, don't they? And you can see something being referenced, and you know exactly what it is that they're referencing. Fantastic.
Yeah, and apparently people just buy them now just for the art, just to put them on the wall. Loads of people are buying vinyl and they're not even playing them, which is just bizarre. But
I mean, I wonder how much of it as well is to do with kind of like the permanence of it. So I know we've had this conversation before, but I've got more records that I bought like 25 years ago that I can still listen to than records I bought 15 years ago, because stuff I bought 15 years ago, kind of like the beginning of digital, was all covered in DRM, and they've gone out of business, and those retailers gone out of business. And so, even if I knew what random hard drive that's in the loft those things were on, I probably wouldn't be able to play them anymore. And I think now we're in this era of essentially renting our record collections from your Apples and your Spotifys. I wonder if something about the resurgence of vinyl is to do with the permanence of it and the fact that, you've bought it now, and as long as you've got like a needle and a cone, you're going to be able to like listen to that after the apocalypse. So it's quite, there's something very sort of anti-streaming about vinyl as well, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm a bit of a hoarder, so it's just stuff nice to have that sort of stuff around you. And I know a lot of people aren't like that; they're quite minimal these days. But no, I like to have the tangible thing. Yeah, much nicer.
So we're getting into the section of the podcast now where we talk about recommendations and things that make your lives easier. So, what's your one absolutely indispensable tool? What's the thing that you use every day that you couldn't do without, that you absolutely swear by and would be lost without?
Right. Well, obviously I have to use a Mac every day, my artwork, but it is useless without my Beryl pen.
Nice.
I have boxes of these Beryl fine liner pens, and they drive my husband mad because they're everywhere. They also bleed if they get wet, but notebook and a Beryl pen, that is all I need, really. Possibly 2 Beryl pens in case one runs out, but I carry those everywhere. Bags everywhere. Every bag I have has at least 2 Beryl pens in it. So that's what I had to go with, really. I mean, obviously I have lots of Apple products for my work and they're lovely, but there's, design is pointless. Designing on a computer is pointless if you haven't sketched it out first. And that's what the Beryl pen is for.
So we're talking the classic old school Beryl fine line fiber tip marker.
Yeah, and they're so hard to get now. I had a bit of panic during lockdown because I emptied a box. I thought, oh my God, I'm out of pens, because I normally have about 3 boxes sitting waiting to go. Even though I've already said I've got 2 pens in virtually every bag, it still panicked me. And I went online looking and I couldn't get them anywhere. And in the end, I had to buy some off eBay. I found somebody who was selling old stock on eBay. So I don't know if they don't make them anymore, which just made me really sad, or if it was just a pandemic thing. But I've now got a little stash to keep me going. But they're great. And the coloured ones are nice as well. I've just got a thing about them. I've always had a thing about them. We used to have them as the pens in class, I think when I was in middle school. And they just were something to aspire to, was to have a pack of Beryl pens that was all my own. And now I own 100.
They are I have to say, I have not seen one of those pens in years. They are a classic. And the
turquoise one for people who can't see, turquoise one with the black end and the black cap.
Yeah, and the cap posts nicely, doesn't it, on the end?
And that's another thing.
Yeah,
nice.
It's a good sort of click. Yeah. So what is it particularly about that pen?
Oh, it's lovely. If you've got a nice heavyweight cartridge paper which is sort of quite smooth, it just glides. It's just lovely. It makes your handwriting look lovely. I just love it. It's a great pen. Anybody needs any other pen than a Beryl pen.
Pens are a subject that I know a lot of people can get quite personal about. I'm a fountain pen person myself. My wife likes a gel pen, but the Beryl fiber tip fine liner is a proper like old school blast from the past.
Yeah, I'd love to know when they first arrived, but I've definitely seen them since the 70s.
I think as well, didn't they re-engineer the cap to add the little airflow thing in it? Is it got a little airflow thing in it now?
No.
So you can't choke on it?
It's properly dangerous.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so that's
that one.
Maybe that's one of the ones that it was kind of been sitting on a shelf since the 1980s, and just like they couldn't sell them like to schools because of the choking hazard.
I know they did that with Bic, didn't they? They did that with the Bic biro. They put a hole in the end.
That's right. Yeah, I'm certain that there was a generation of barrel pens that had like a little airflow thing in the end of it, but I'll have to Google it. Have to Google it when we finish just to check it out. So, aside from your barrel pen, and you're not allowed to include your recent purchase of 1,000 barrel pens off eBay in a job lot in your answer to the next question, but what was the last like really, really useful thing that you bought or acquired?
The last useful thing that I bought was a Ring doorbell, which I then really enjoyed setting up and using the app and getting that going. I've bought some cameras to go with it and I've added to it already. So easy to use. It's a great brand. Visually, it's a brilliant brand. Product design is lovely. But I just kept having, in our street, the numbers end at our house, and then the street carries on and it becomes the avenue, and then all the numbers start again. And we've got a sign on our door that says, please check that you need to be, need to be here. This is the street, not the avenue, you know. And people still knock on the door with deliveries. And I just thought, right, I need one of those Ring doorbells. So I just can answer my phone and go, it's the wrong address. But it's just so clever. The app and everything's ever so clever. And then I have had to contact their customer service because I messed something up. And the customer service is brilliant as well. So big tick for Ring. But it's again, the way they've designed everything's very Apple, isn't it? It's the graphics has got that sort of feel to it, and the products have as well. So I was totally sucked in ages before I bought it. But yeah, that's my most recent gadget.
Excellent. So are you in the process of now smarting up? Do you think you're going to get on that sort of smart home bandwagon?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my son wanted an Alexa thing, and we've bought him one of those for his bedroom. I really don't like the idea of that being in the house, but it's confined to his room, and that's that. But I wouldn't have them anywhere else, no. I like the idea of having lots of speakers around the house, so you can just listen to music and turn on speakers as you walk through the house. Mm-hmm. And I babysat for somebody when I was about 16, 17, and they had that, and it was amazing. And so that was in the 90s. To that, it's still something that I need to sort out. So I imagine I'll probably get sucked into a Sonos vortex at some point.
Nice.
Yeah.
The problem is, if you listen to records, of course, then if you're wondering how around the house listening to it, you then have to go back to turn it over.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah.
So you don't want to wander too far away from it.
No.
Were you ever did you ever watch Twin Peaks?
Yes, I did watch that.
Yeah, because there's I don't know if you remember the really, really terrifying episode in season 2 where we find out who the killer is, and there is a extremely disturbing scene there. The disturbing scene starts with the record finishing and just going into the run out groove and clicking around this run out groove.
Oh yeah, I do remember that now.
Yeah. And that run out groove is basically the soundtrack to a horrific murder sequence that also, for some inexplicable reason, involves a horse and various other things that are happening in the background. And for years, that was a proper trigger for me. If I fell asleep listening to a record. And I think it's possibly that I fell asleep listening to a record not long after this had happened. I just woke up and it was just like click, click, click. And I was absolutely terrified. So yeah, and it took me a really long time to get to the stage where I wasn't just like jumping to my feet and whipping the needle off the record, just before the last chord had even sounded, to avoid myself getting dragged down this Lynchian terror hole.
Oh no, I don't really remember it, so it didn't traumatize me.
That's good. We rewatched it. We rewatched it long since, because the final, because they were doing like the reboot or the kind of like the third season or whatever. And yeah, it's still bizarre. Like even after although the strangest thing about it after all these years is that I don't understand how it was ever on primetime television. Like I
had to watch it again because of the reboot, and I found it really boring. the first time I watched it in black and white and on a screen which was about 14 inches because I didn't have a TV in my room and my parents wouldn't have had it on. So I watched it on this, my mum had this TV, which was also a radio. I don't know if you remember them.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it was 14 inches, the screen, might even have been 12 inches. No, 14 inches. But the back of it was almost twice as long as what the screen was in size. It was just the weirdest thing. It was so that she could watch a bit of TV in bed. But you got the TV signal on a radio aerial.
So one of those extending ones?
Yeah, extendable antennas. It was just shocking quality, but it went well with Twin Peaks, the slightly grainy black and white. So when I started watching it, I couldn't get into it. It felt a bit boring to me, and I don't know, maybe that's because I watched it in black and white.
So it lost some of the kind of noirish grittiness. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so we're into the home straight now, Vicki. So I would like you to complete the sentence. Do yourself a favour.
Get a coach. Obviously, something I'm quite passionate about, as I am a coach myself. But I think everybody who's in business, or everybody who works really, should have somebody in their life who's going to listen to them, be on their side, but not get emotionally involved and keep you accountable. I have to say, I've got a couple of coaches, and without them, I don't know what I would do, to be honest with you. They're brilliant. You can tell people you live with stuff about work and nobody really is listening in my house, but they're not. They've got their own thing going on. But somebody who is there to listen to you and listen to what you've got to say, and also challenge what you're saying, ask you questions you hadn't thought of yourself, possibly mentor you and give you a bit of advice. That's just brilliant. I think it's priceless, and everybody should have one. There's must be one out there for everybody.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's something that I've discovered at various points where I've been a little bit stuck, and then having someone to just ask questions from a point of view of no real agenda it's a really helpful way of unsticking you from a particular rut, or maybe just helping you look at something in a slightly different. You said you've got two coaches at the moment, so they for different parts of your life or different aspects of your work, or what's the different dynamics there?
Well, I have one coach who got me into coaching, and so he's responsible, but he's sort of mentoring me now, and that's purely to help me get on with my coaching business and move it forward. He's very good. And then I have another coach who's there for all other business related stuff that I need to work my way through. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of business, working on your business rather than in your business, kind of.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing. Yeah. Obviously, it all crosses over. And now that one of my coaches is more of a mentor, he's busy with his business, he's less there for me. So, I have one to pay for as well.
I think certainly from a point of view of being a business owner, having someone who knows about the business side of it, whether it's a paid business coach or somebody who's just been through it and is able to be there and act a bit of a mentor, is absolutely vital, because when people get into starting their own business, and I include myself in this, and I imagine it's similar for you, it's like you get into it to do the thing that the business is about, not to run a business. And then you end up finding just that there's so much, actually often there's more time taken in just figuring out the business side of it than there is doing the thing that you started the business to do in the first place. So, and it's easy to let some of that slide, or it's easy to kind of shortcut it, or like just bumble through it without really understanding. So actually having someone who can guide you or challenge you or point out things that you could be doing differently, I think is really, really helpful. Also,
if you're a bit creative, you're very much drawn in by shiny things. You can be heading in one direction and you can think, oh, actually, I could do that. And instead of pausing and thinking about it rationally, do I need to do that? What would that add? You can go off at a tangent and you can spend ages going all the way around the houses and coming back, and you've just gone off course, and then you sometimes don't know how to get yourself back on course. So it's a good way to, good to chat to somebody and say, I'm thinking of doing this, and then they can question you and help you decide whether it's the right thing before you waste tons of time doing it necessarily. Or maybe just say, well, don't forget, leave this by this time, because and remember you wanted to do this. So perhaps you look at that after you've done this.
Yeah.
So it's just somebody who keeps you heading in the right direction and allows you to explore stuff without going too far off at a tangent, really. Saves you no end of time having a coach. It really does. And I know sometimes people worry about the cost, but if you think about the amount of time you can waste, that has a cost too. Just get a coach. It'll save you loads of money in the long run.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for today, Vicki. This has been great. It's been lovely to talk to you again.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Where can people find you, find out more about you?
Find me on LinkedIn, Vicki Lovegrove, or at my website, which is 70-3.co.uk. So my business is 73 Design Limited. I've been around a while, so I'm easily found.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And thank you for listening to Yourself a Favour, everybody. We'll see you again soon. You've been listening to Do Yourself a Favour, the podcast about learning from experience and the things we do to make our lives easier. Brought to you by Make Work Work Better. My name's Tim Sisney from Make Work Work Better. Our theme tune is by the Titanics. Talk to you again soon.